Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing your favorite fantasy romance books of 2025. Alright guys, I do this video twice a year, and it is one of my absolute favorites. I asked over on my Instagram for you guys to tell me the top fantasy romance book you've read so far this year, and I got so many responses. So I'm going to be sharing a spoiler-free plot synopsis of every book, and then if I read the book, I'll give you my overall thoughts. But we have a lot of books to get through, so if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon. I'll link down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these fantasy romance books. So first up, we have The Courting of Bristol, Keats. I am so mad at myself. I have had this book on multiple TBRs, and I still have not picked it up. But one person said this was their favorite read of the year so far. So in this story, we are following this girl who has lost both of her parents, but she soon discovers that her father might be alive, just taken to a realm of like gods and monsters. So in order to try to find him, she ends up journeying to the fave realm, where she makes a deal with the fave king, not realizing that he might be the reason her family has been torn apart in the first place. And I believe this is a duology or series. I know a second book has released, but I definitely need to pick this book up ASAP. And next up, a lot of you said Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry, which, considering this book only released a week ago at the time I'm filming this, is really impressive. So I ended up giving this 3.75. However, a lot of my friends have absolutely loved this book, so definitely pick this up if you haven't yet. This is Devney Perry's debut into fantasy romance, and it seems like she's killing it. So I'm very excited for the sequel. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this story, it is a slow burn romance. We are following Odessa, and although Odessa is the eldest daughter of this kingdom, she was never meant to rule. Her younger sister is supposed to marry someone from a neighboring kingdom to kind of complete this marriage pact that all of these different kingdoms kind of marry into each other in order for everyone to get along. So anyway, when the prince of the neighboring kingdom shows up, he really blows everyone's mind when he says he would rather marry Odessa than her younger sister. So now Odessa has to journey with this man who seems to detest her and is kind of thrust into this future that was never meant for her. So we're following Odessa as she has to embrace this new role, and it really goes from there. And it does have Witcher vibes. There are these different beasts that I feel like this would be so cool if it was adapted into a TV show or movie, which I do believe it is going to be. The different animals and beasts in this were by far my favorite part. But overall, this is a very solid adult fantasy romance that a lot of people are enjoying, so highly, highly recommend. Alright, and I just watched 2 videos on how to pronounce this author's last name, so if I completely butcher it, this is what the internet told me. But essentially any book by Helen Scheuerer. I had a few people say the second book in the Blood and Steel series, or the Legend of Thesmar series. I had 2 people say the third book in the Legend of Thesmar series. I personally love the first book in the Legend of Thesmar series, and then a few people said Iron and Embers, which is the first book in the spin-off Legend of Thesmar series. So any book by Helen Scheuerer, I feel like you're probably good to go. I have not read this particular book yet. However, if you're unfamiliar with the Legend of Thesmar series, I feel like I talk about it a lot, so I'll keep it very brief. But we're following this girl named Althea, who longs to become a warrior of legend. Unfortunately, women are no longer allowed to wield weapons in this community, but she's been practicing in secret, and one day she's discovered by Wilder Hawthorne, and he ends up becoming her mentor in the hopes that eventually she'll be able to pass all of these trials and become a warrior and fulfill her dreams. So this is following a character that we meet in that story and her romance and kind of her journey. So I am very excited to read this, and I'm so happy a few of you said this was your favorite. I saw a lot of mixed reviews when this book came out, so I feel like that's why I've been kind of waiting to pick it up. But now I'm really excited, so I'm hoping to get to this in the summer. And next up is a young adult fantasy romance, Heir on the Rise. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, I had no idea I owned a physical copy of this book, or when I got this book, However, I just looked up the plot. It sounds awesome. So another book. I'm very mad at myself. I have not read yet. But apparently this is following a orphan human girl named Faye, or Faith, and she lives in the outer towns. Now, in this area, the Fae rule, and humans are taught to obey. Now, our main character just dreams of a better life, but everything changes when a Fae warrior realizes that our main character possesses abilities only a Fae should wield. So now she kind of has to get to the bottom of how she has these powers while these powers begin to manifest, and she has to learn to control them. So it sounds like a great start to a series. I don't think I've read this author before, so I'm actually going to message the person that said this was their favorite read of the year to kind of find out more about it, but I'm very, very excited. And next up we have Heavenbreaker. Now this is an adult fantasy romance, and I've seen really mixed reviews for this, and I feel like I haven't seen people really talking about this recently. So I was very surprised when someone said this was their top book of the year, but now I am intrigued. So in the story, we are following a girl named Sonali, I believe, and when a very powerful duke ends up ordering her death, she decides she is going to strike back. So with nothing to lose, she ends up entering this mech tournament known as the Joust, and she's going to be riding some sort of mechanical war machine known as Heavenbreaker, and she's going to attempt to kill all of the nobles that have wronged her. And I believe the story really gets going from there. I don't know if there is a romance or if this is just like a fantasy, but it does have like sci-fi vibes, and once again, I've heard very mixed things. So I am willing to give this a shot. Let me know if you have read this, what did you think? And next up we have Ironside Academy. Now technically this is Omega / Paranormal, and it's Why Choose for those of you who are a fan of Why Choose. Now, my friend recently binged this series and said I needed to read it immediately, and then I had one person say this was their top read of the year, so I wanted to include it. I don't really understand the plot of this series. I just know it is a very slow burn, Why Choose, and we're following a girl, or I think she's a Sigma. I am terrible with the different like hierarchies of the wolves. I need to read like a lot more Omegaverse. But anyway, this girl ends up going to Ironside Academy, which has been described as the Hunger Games meets America's Got Talent. I don't know what that means, but apparently having a very good social media following is very important for the wolves that go to this academy that is also described as a prison. And I'm guessing she has to somehow survive in this academy, and while doing so, she gets a lot of wolf boyfriends that probably hated her to begin with and then end up kind of liking her. All of that is just my assumption, but I will definitely be reading this. I have to check if there is audiobooks available, but everyone I've talked to that's read this have said they've had such a fun time with it. Just know that it is slow burn Why Choose, so I don't think anything really starts to get going until like the second or third book. And next up, we have The Vampire's Bargain, and I have to say, this cover is stunning. So apparently in this story, we are following a witch who was once the most powerful witch of this realm until her lover betrays her and locks her away for 50 years. Well, she's able to eventually escape or emerge, and when she does, she makes a deal with a vampire lord. If she can kill the king of the vampires, he will help return her powers to her. And at this point, I believe the vampires are kind of like taken over the realm. So it sounds awesome. It was Becky from Bex Reads who actually selected this book. And recently we've been having very like similar reading tastes. So if you have not checked out Becky's channel, I will leave it down in the description below. She has amazing recs and she's just like such a sweet person. So please check out her channel. But I'm very excited to pick this up, and I'm very interested if I'm gonna love this as much as she did. And of course, multiple people said Quicksilver by Callie Hart was their favorite read so far this year, and so well deserved. Now, that being said, I need to do a reread of this book very, very soon because Brimstone is releasing, and I was recently talking to a friend about this book, and I realized I forget a lot of like the little plots and like things that go on in this, so definitely need to do a reread. But if you're unfamiliar with the plot, we are following Saris, who is a human girl living in the lands of the Undying Queen, and in order to survive, she is a thief. Now, she ends up being caught and actually gravely wounded, and before she can succumb to her injuries, Kingfisher appears, and he is this Fae warrior from another realm, and he ends up taking Sarah's to the Fae realm, where he magically binds her to him and says that he believes that she might possess powers that can manipulate a certain kind of sentient compound, and if she is able to do this, she will be able to, like, help his people, but she doesn't really give him a choice, because he immediately, like, forces her to be stuck with him, and he's very, very brooding. I absolutely love Kingfisher. Besides his name, I don't know what it is about Kingfisher. That name just kind of bothers me. But overall, I love this book. I would also like to say I love the original covers. I recently saw the covers that are going to be releasing for Brimstone and the re-release of Quicksilver. And I'm not as much of a fan. I really wish we kind of had a cover like this for book 2 as well. But yeah, kind of a bummer. But anyway, what a wonderful story. And if you have not read this yet, definitely pick it up. And next up, we have The Wind Weaver. Now, I've seen so many other fantasy romance content creators raving about this book. I only had one person say it was their top read of the year, but I have a feeling in a few weeks, this would have been like the #1 pick. I cannot wait to read this. I'm really hoping to get to it at the end of May. If not, definitely early June. But apparently, this is like an enemies to lovers fantasy romance. We're following this girl that lives in a world where having magic equates to death. So our main character is set to be executed, but she ends up being saved by a commander named Scythe, who's actually harboring some secrets of his own. So he ends up taking our main character to the Northlands, where he informs her that she's actually a remnant. And that means that she is going to have to restore power to this realm or die trying, and I believe she's going to have a romance with Commander Scythe. But once again, everyone is talking about this book and saying that it is absolutely amazing and like the next Fourth Wing and ACOTAR. So I really have a severe case of FOMO, and I cannot wait to read this. And next up is The Scattered Bones, and I have to say, the responses that included The Scattered Bones were by far the funniest. I had one person say, "This Scattered Bones, but you could not pay me to read that book again." Another person said, "This Scattered Bones, but it still haunts me." So, just go into this book knowing it is a dark fantasy romance, and it's not that there are some like very, I don't want to say body horror, but there's definitely a scene that's like very upsetting. Just the tone of this book is very dark and kind of morbid and a little bit depressing. But that being said, it is one of the best books I've ever read. I loved this book, and in no way would I think you could pack so much story into such a short book. So much happens, and just, I can't believe this is a standalone. This could have been a full series, and I would definitely read an entire series of this story and these characters and this world, but oh my gosh, I loved this. But I also probably will not be reading this book again anytime soon. In the story, we are following Sela, and after breaking a sacred vow, she ends up falling in love with a thief. Now, when they are discovered, the thief named Cade ends up being very brutally torn apart, and his body is scattered throughout the realm. And a mysterious stranger ends up going to Sela and says, "Hey, I can bring your true love back, but you have to retrieve these body parts." So she goes on a journey, and she has to overcome these obstacles that are set by these vengeful gods in order to retrieve these body parts of her love. And it's a beautiful story, and it is dual timeline, so we're watching Sela slowly fall in love with Cade, while also watching her try to defend this love and get his body parts back. And it is just such a unique story. So if you have not read this and you've checked the trigger warnings and it sounds good to you, highly, highly recommend. And next up we have A Language of Dragons. I was so excited when this book released, and then I completely forgot about it. So now I definitely want to pick it up soon. In the story, we are following this woman named Vivian who just wants to live a quiet life studying dragon languages, but everything changes when she's thrust into this secret war and forced to become a code breaker in the hopes that she can decipher this super secret, like, forgotten dragon language, and it could completely change the course of the war. However, as she's kind of discovering this language, she starts to realize the enemy might not actually be who she originally thought it was, and I believe she starts to have a bunch of epiphanies about what's actually going on. And I heard really good things. Once again, I was so excited when this book released, And then I don't know what happened. I think my TBR just got out of control. So if you read this, let me know. I feel like I don't hear a lot of people talking about this book, but at least one person said it was their favorite of the year. So I'm very excited to pick it up. So this next series, I actually just added to my June TBR after talking to some of my friends about it during some reading sprints. We have the Avalon Tower. Apparently this is just a really fun time, and the comedy is kind of hit or miss, but just like a light, fun read, and the plot sounds really entertaining. So we're following this girl that all she wants to do is go on a relaxing European vacation, and then she ends up being kidnapped by a ridiculously hot fae named Raphael, who tells her that he needs her to kill the prince of the fae, I believe. So she is then taken to this super secret like spy academy that is in a gothic tower, and she's gonna be trained on how to kill this fae or die trying. And I think like the fate of humanity is somehow involved, but it just sounds really good. So I will definitely be starting this series in June. And one person said Blood of Hercules by Jasmine, which made me so happy because I love this book. I feel like this might be kind of similar to Avalon Tower in terms of like just a fun time with a kick-ass heroine, and the humor in this, I could not get enough. I also talk about this book very, very often on my channel, so I will keep this very brief. But this is a why choose fantasy romance. We're following our main character, Alexis, and she lives in a world that has been infested by Titans. And the only beings able to stop the Titans are these Spartans, who are the children of the gods. So our main character, Alexis, is an orphan. She is being raised by foster parents who are horribly abusive and neglectful, so double whammy there. And when she comes of age, she ends up taking a test that says she possesses Spartan blood. So she is immediately whisked away to a Spartan war academy where she has to fight to the death in the hopes that she will survive and then be granted a mentor who is a Spartan who's going to train her on like how to kill Titans. So all of the love interests in this story are unbelievably morally gray, kind of more towards villain. And I was obsessed with all of them, and I just loved this story. So it's probably not going to be for everyone, but this is one of the best books I've read so far this year, and I cannot wait for the sequel. And next up, 4 people said either the Wolf King or the Night Prince. I had no idea this duology existed until I did my fantasy romance TBR, and apparently this book released last year, so I don't know how I missed this. But we have the Wolf King, and in this story, we are following Aurora, and the night before her arranged marriage, she ends up saving a werewolf, which catches the attention of the alpha of the pack. So the alpha was a captive, but he ends up escaping, and when he escapes, he kidnaps Aurora, and now she is kind of forced into this war between the humans and the werewolves, and I'm sure when she kind of gets to wherever the werewolves are, there's a romance between her and the alpha. I'm not positive of that, it's just my guess. But people seem to be loving this duology, so I definitely want to pick it up soon. And last up we have Blood Oath, which I believe is more like paranormal and also why choose. So we are following students that go to Everbound University, and in this university there are 4 houses that send their students in order to form these quintets, and that will actually break the curses that are put on these 4 houses. So our main character ends up being paired with apparently a bunch of very attractive guys, but for some reason she doesn't want to complete this quintet, but all of the guys really want to break the curse. So they are all about kind of starting this relationship. And I believe it goes from there. That is pretty much the gist I got from Goodreads. I have not read this yet. I have had multiple people tell me I will love this series. I actually did download the audiobook, and maybe I will start it in June. I feel like I'm adding so many books to my June TBR, and I really don't have any more room. But I'm definitely going to read it at some point this summer. I want to do like a why choose vlog, because it's been a while since I've read a really good why choose. Alright guys, those are all your top fantasy romance books of 2025. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Jess, Leslie, Lotta, Spoon, and Kat. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.